We are gathered here today as the motion picture men. Normally, we are Bootu boys. I am Brian Vaughn. Alongside me, Spencer Hendricks.
I cannot get over how classy we sound when we open that way. I feel like we might be kind of like part podcast, part opera. Is that a thing? Is that a genre we can experiment with?
Well, we can be pioneers. Who wants to play what sort of role? Van Lee is here as well. Van Lee, what sort of role in the Bootu Boys / motion picture men opera would you like to play?
Maestro.
Sure.
That's a thing, right? Where you wave the stick,
like
the
the
little
conductor?
sticks. Okay, real quick story here. My ex-girlfriend, Gail.
Was a conductor?
She was a violist, and when she was younger, was a prodigy and potentially could have had a career as a classical violist.
And then she rejected it all.
Yes, my big thing that I would do to piss her off was I would say that I think the conductor's overrated. And she would become furious.
Wasn't there another thing too? Like you could call it like mix it up with violin or something. And
fiddle.
Okay, so apparently a viola is far more difficult than violin. I don't know if violinists will say that, but most people do agree to it. But the other big thing I would do is I would say it's harder to put out an elite song as like a rock trio, guitar, bass, drums,
than a concert,
than being a small minor piece of concert, because there's 1,000 pieces. Now I understand there's difficulty involved, but
yeah, it's a different skill. But this is something I've thought about a lot, like because to do the smaller scale thing you described involves more compositional ability,
right?
Like to be able to write more versus kind of perform a smaller part in an ensemble.
Plus, no one's gonna really know if you have a small part and you mess up. Like what I did when I was in band, obviously I wasn't...
We haven't talked about this since Coach.
I wasn't a professional band person. I didn't have Gail's skill or anything. But if I didn't want to play, I just didn't play. And the song went on around me and it was not a big deal. You don't have nearly as much pressure on you in that
and
setting.
Spencer and I were in a rock band together and you can't really do that.
That would have been a problem.
Oh, my part's just not there any longer and it's so noticeable.
It's like I can't hear the keyboards at all.
Did someone fall off the stage?
Another thing about Gail and that viola, didn't want to play it. She was really good at it and didn't want to demonstrate. I couldn't really ever get her to do it. I think once for like 5 seconds. Wasn't comfortable with it.
Yeah, there was a lot of stage fright in that regard. She didn't like this being the center of attention in that regard. But
if she didn't like that part of her life, maybe it was represented something bad to her. I don't know.
It was just a thing that she just didn't really, I don't know, it didn't equal what Gail was, so she just didn't want to do it anymore.
Well, this is an interesting way to start the episode. We're talking about Online 2013.
I think there's some parallels in Mary's life.
It actually does add up. We're talking about a former relationship of Van's. Will the relationship between John and Mary also become a former relationship? Well, we're about to find out today on Motion Picture Men. I'm really glad we started off with a really great diversion because this movie is stupid.
It's not as good as our diversion last episode towards the end, but we'll see what happens this time around.
You just never know. Well, where did we leave off? I'll tell you. John, a young married Christian man, is debating what to do after sharing a kiss with his ex-flame Adriana after she came back into his life through socialfriendpages.com.
The social media page of the day.
Which, we checked, is not real any longer. We'd like to buy it.
We did verify.
Before John levels with his wife Mary, again, Mary, biblical, he gets a mysterious call at work from Adriana's cosmetics mogul husband, Pierre Boudreau, who's definitely French. Pierre wants to meet tonight. Will the meeting be of top business minds, or has John's moment of reckoning come?
I like this previously on Lost edition of the
Well, we kind of need one breaking
here.
The movies up in half. It's fun doing these. It's been a while, a year.
Yeah, you injected some drama in here that is utterly lacking for the majority of the film.
I like to consider myself a spiritual descendant of Robert Vaughn, also a guy who did voiceovers, probably for things I would consider more official than podcast coverage of Online 2013.
Like the Hurtline commercials.
Yeah, exactly.
And as
never mind, fuck him. I'm better than him.
Well, he was the
I'm not for sale. You guys know that.
He was the Targaryen at the Wall as well.
Is that real?
Yeah, that was him.
Did he give the Hurtline speech at the Wall?
He did. He was like, Jon Snow, if the walkers come after you, call the Hurtline.
Did you wreck your horse? Call Jon Snow. Use the horn, that big horn we have up here. That's a big deal. It's been a long time since Brian read those books.
Yep.
I should read those books again. It seems like we're avoiding talking about Online 2013.
It does seem that way, but I'm sure
I think
that's
it's not that. I think we're actually full of joy because this movie's going to get weirder.
That is true.
From this point forward for its
that.
final hour.
Good secondary characters coming up here,
yes,
being introduced.
So John's pulling up to Pierre and Adriana's house. That's where we're at now.
It's at the Louvre.
In France, he drove there. And he's going to find out if he's in trouble for his kissing or if he's about to land in the big time in a big pile of francs. Is that right?
Yeah, well, not anymore,
okay.
but
well,
yes.
yeah. Oh, yeah, euros.
Yeah.
Well, when was this movie made? A big man, a lurch type, is creeping at John through the window.
I didn't think we'd get a guy with a more powerful face than the forehead guy, but then this lurch guy shows up. It's pretty impressive.
This person turns out to be Adriana and Pierre's English butler. I think he's English. I think he's just another guy, maybe a deacon at the church, who likes to do a fun British accent.
I think he's a vampire.
He takes John upstairs to Pierre's gigantic empty room that only has a pool table in it. And this is a room too big to only have a pool table in it.
They really struggle with that in these movies. They always get these large houses that are quite nice, and they cannot make it look lived in, so it's just really creepy.
It is in this way that movies of this ilk very closely resemble porn.
Absolutely true. It's that same level of soullessness in it.
Well, it's just like, all right, we don't have a lot of money. We're not spending a ton of money on the set, but this is a nice place we're renting.
Yeah.
And it's probably in California.
I often get distracted with the houses in porn. I'm always like, I look back there, I'm like, that is a freakishly nice house. And then it takes me out of the environment completely.
Yeah, I've seen this before. I know this house. There's a story, I think it's in his biography. I don't know where I read or heard this, that Seth Rogen told about going to look at a house and being like, this house looks so familiar. And he realized it was a porn house. Yeah.
Nice. Do you guys know that movie, A Talking Cat, featuring Eric Roberts as a talking cat, was filmed in a house where they film a lot of porn. And there was one porn film there that was like super anal asses.
I mean, it makes sense for an ass to be anal.
Yeah, and I guarantee
not a vaginal ass.
What you just said would probably be the most upsetting piece of news a Christian filmmaker has ever heard.
In fact, it's fun that we started out with that. We're going in all sorts of directions. Will all those directions lead us to salvation?
Well, and Pierre, as soon as John walks in the room here, says, "Are you a billiards man?" And Pierre is not a billiards man because he doesn't do anything a person who would play billiards would do at all. At one point, he's setting up to hit a different ball, not the cue ball.
It's actually a basketball.
It's amazing.
Do you think that the big butler guy was like, we should be playing snooker?
I guess that is him kind of doing a macho thing to John. Like, you know, you might be the old flame, but look how much of a man I am. And I have this big house and I play billiards.
I know my way around
I don't know.
stick.
It seemed like he was trying to bully him a little bit. Like, now you're in my house and we'll see who's the better billiards man.
And to the movie's credit, that kind of also works in terms of trying to establish the upper hand in a business negotiation.
True.
And what a business negotiation we're about to see. Pierre eventually calls Adriana into the room and yammers on about sparkling water.
So that she can serve them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he has a butler.
John, do you want some sparkling water? Sure. Okay, I'll make my wife get us some.
And somewhere in here, just casually, he's like, yeah, this is a business thing. And we find out they're just discussing the idea of John's firm representing Pierre's company. John does the typical, here's how he wins over Pierre. He does the typical, we're the little guy and maybe we don't have the resources, but we're going to put everything behind you.
I've never heard of that thought process before. They must have come up with this in this movie.
Well, it's stupid enough that the average idiot watching this movie can go, I understand what they're trying to do.
Well, real business right now.
Won't fool Pierre. Something much dumber will. Pierre shuts it down and says, I just want results. And John says, okay, well, we'll provide them. And Pierre says, well, okay, you're hired then.
When watching that movie, my reaction was kind of, how can we give you results right now, Pierre? That's not, I just care about results. Okay, well, I don't know how we can do that because we haven't started working together yet.
They agree to be in business and they do a toast. Pierre toasts America, perhaps sarcastically. The butler comes in, he comes back in and he tells Pierre that he has a phone call. And then the butler walks backwards out of the scene.
He does.
That can't have been on. Did they plan that?
I don't think that was in the stage directions.
It looked really unnatural, and
because he looks really unnatural.
Yeah, the butler perhaps thought he was working a haunted house. I don't know why, but it wasn't until the third of my
Many viewings.
four viewings of this movie that I noticed that. Johnny thanks Adriana for the business opportunity that's arisen here, thanks to their infidelity.
I'm sorry you said arisen, and I can't help but think of the parallels.
Of Christ.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You see, what I was thinking of was what was it called? The Great Arising, where Octopus Inc. would bring the techno
Grand
drone.
Arising.
Grand
Of course,
Arising,
yeah.
that's it. That's what I would think of.
Yeah, the corporate raiders, another of Satan's tricks.
You know what Krang has in common with John Cusack? Also not in this movie.
Krang could have never been in Say Anything, for instance. If
Following
Krang
the
is
boombox.
outside your window, you grabbing the phone.
I really, honestly never thought that Krang and John Cusack would be compared to each other or talked about in the same
Here we
sentence.
are.
Yeah, it happened.
What if Pierre was in that body, that robot body that Krang has here?
I could see that.
Yeah, stomping around.
What if the brain that we see in Krang's body was actually just Pierre's head?
Okay, I'm on board.
That's less creepy.
I like it. And he'd have the French accent still.
Where is the shredder? We must take over New York City. Dimension X.
After John's big business triumph, he comes home. He's tired, but he tells Mary, I've got a big new client. While this is good news, I'm going to be working late even more. Mary's supportive. She says they're going to figure it out, and she talks about taking a big vacation once the campaign's over, and John gets really annoyed. He's like, oh, don't even talk about vacations at a time like this.
Yeah, it sounds great. Let's talk about it tomorrow. Let's talk about your idea of having vacation a different time.
Let's talk about happy things later. And she says she wants to go to the Bahamas. I can't help but think that John in the Bahamas would be the worst person ever.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
such a bummer.
He doesn't
would
seem
hate
like
fun.
a good vacation guy. Also, I think the idea of him coming home and being like, honey, you'll never believe it. Thought it was going to be related to cheating on you. It was actually a business thing. I was
really sweating it.
Only the last part of it did I realize I really was doing business tonight, honey.
And she goes, wait a minute. Let's back up. What was that first part?
And then he slaps his hands on his cheeks like Macaulay Culkin in Home Alone. Like, oh, no. This movie is not that far from being that stupid. Mary stays up late after John goes to bed. She's working on the household budget after he's fast asleep, and she notices a charge for $600 at Antonio's. Oh, it's the dinner that he had with Adriana, and Mary tells herself, that's just a client. But I feel like more important than any of that, I should mention this is not some sort of online banking client we're looking at. It's just a generic spreadsheet.
It's Excel, and that's it.
It just has a header, though, that says First National Trust Online Banking. But that is the only facade given to us to pretend that it's online banking.
There's some cool stuff in here because the title,
Yeah, of
it's an
course.
Excel spreadsheet. So
Fitness
the title,
Fit Club, I've been there.
well, the title of the Excel spreadsheet is Credit Card Report Antonio's. So this is something a graphic designer or person for the movie was creating, and they saved it that so they know what it would be. It makes zero sense in the
I
context
broke
of
my
what it would
thermometer
be.
the other day. I had to go down to Timmy Boy's Pharmacy and get a new one.
That's a good one. There's a 22-cent charge for, and I didn't get this at first, but I finally realized what it was, Size Special Homemade Tea Blend.
Well, guess what? I was able to purchase Box Concerto number 99.
How much
you
you
can
pay?
interpret that however you like. I don't know what it means.
It was the low price of $167.09.
Seems pretty good. Is it for the rights? I mean, I would buy that for $160.
There's also Francis's Bacon Meat Store. There's a charge for that.
Bacon meat store.
Yeah.
You don't want to get confused with the other bacon store, the one that's not meat.
Well, what about the Fitness Fit Club?
Yeah, that place is great. It really tells you what you're going to be doing there and what you hope to achieve.
Well, we have a pretty good snapshot of this happily married couple's lifestyle.
By the way, we have a high-powered marketing executive and a doctor. They don't need to budget. They've got all the money in the world.
No, they're fine. After Mary goes up and joins John in bed, John's phone buzzes the loudest any phone has ever buzzed, but it only wakes John up.
And it's by his head on the bed?
And John flings Mary off him just like a corpse, and it's fine. She does not wake up. He clicks and clacks on his old-ass phone, and it's Adriana. And she says, hey, babe. She doesn't say that.
Might
But
as well,
she says,
though.
get up, I'm on SFP. So he goes downstairs to get on the computer to get on SFP. They could just text.
It's so much easier being on SFP than texting, Brian. Don't be like that.
The SFP interface is made for the blind and elderly. It has this cartoonishly huge interface. You can fit exactly 3 lines of text on an entire laptop screen.
It really is one of those, like if you go to the grocery store and they have those books for old people with extra large print, that's what this is on a website.
It reminded me of that phone service Jitterbug if it were in an app form on a computer. It's that kind of thing.
I don't know Jitterbug.
Really?
Did it do this?
It's a long time ago. It might have been dead by now. But
This is if complaining was an app, what it would look like. It turns out Adriana, she still wants John. He reiterates that he's a married man.
happily.
Mary comes down while he's doing all this SFP chatting and says, "What's up?" John says, "I couldn't sleep. I was just playing around online."
And this is the second time in the movie that someone enters the room when John is on SFP and he slams the laptop shut in the most obvious manner
he's
possible.
not playing that cool at all.
And when Mary jokes around and cracks a smile about what John might be doing, John immediately gets defensive. And it was clear she was being nice. He offers some sort of tossed off sorry and just goes back to bed. And Mary wants to look at the laptop, but she doesn't because she's a woman of God. We go to Adriana to see what she's doing on the end of the socialfriendspages.com conversation. What a mouthful.
And you got through it. That was the first try.
And she's in her specific reading chair in her bedroom. What a luxury. That would be cool.
That would be nice.
In her kimono.
And Pierre is chastising her about buying shoes.
In his kimono.
And he says, "I care about you in my kimono, but I work to give you nice things, so that affords me the opportunity to treat you like crap while wearing a kimono."
He also does say, "Are you on that stupid website again?" And that is the most accurate thing anyone has said in this movie. That is a stupid website.
It is a stupid website in every way. Adriana tells Pierre, "I'm not materialistic," but he ignores that and says, "I love possessions." And he goes in to kiss her, but she rebuffs him and says, "I have a headache." And he gets mad because he's a typical man, he can't handle it. He's going to get, what do you call it? Blue balls.
He's fine. I will go pleasure myself in the bed.
"Oh, we've made a French mess.
Please clean it up, butler." And then that big butler comes in.
Lap it up like a dog."
And he's actually tricking him. He doesn't want him to clean it up. He's just helping him finish.
Oh,
God. There is nothing passionate about this. This is purely mechanical. Pierre tells Adriana, "You'd be nothing without me," or something. And she says, "Well, I gave up modeling for you." And he says, "Well, you spend a lot of money."
That's about all right.
This is probably the most sympathetic from this point forward that Adriana comes across, because she really does get kind of beat up in this conversation.
Well, he ends it with being like, you really, all you do is you spend my money.
Yeah, he lords it over her.
Well, what's interesting, and this is perhaps jumping ahead a little bit, I don't know what they're trying to do here, because we're presenting Adriana as a sympathetic figure, but also she's still the villain in that she's trying to tempt John.
I like that, though. I think that this
there
is
her,
depth. This is her being like, I gotta get out. Like, she's reaching for a branch.
But in
John,
in the context of the way these Christian movies are made and everything, do you think what is
Spencer's
the role?
like, what are we doing here?
No, I'm liking the idea that Van's saying like, well, but this is bad.
I mean, it is.
I don't know if that's what's happening right now.
Yeah, because what is the intention of the screenwriter here?
Yeah, and Van, I think you're right. I think the intention of the screenwriter is muddled. If a real director made this movie, I think we would like this decision because it would make sense on screen. Like the actor would be showing us that desperation.
You want your villains, and she is playing a villain of sorts. You want your villains to be conflicting. Sometimes you might want to sympathize. Sometimes you might want to be like, what a piece of shit. But that's not what a movie like this would do.
There's no way.
So we don't know why they're trying to make us feel bad for her right now.
I just did some dog sitting at my sister's house, and I watched a bunch of movies. And I rewatched Sideways, which I had not watched in a long time. And every character in that movie sucks. Like, they're horrible people. They do really bad things. Worse than anything in this movie. But it's so well written and acted that there's a part of him that you understand.
And you like him a little.
No matter what, you can at least have a little empathy. And this movie, everybody's so broadly drawn that when you just shove things together, like she's trying to cheat on her husband and break up a marriage, but also she's being abused, it feels really jarring.
Yeah, it would be a great touch in a real movie.
Because I think you'd characterize this Pierre stuff as emotional abuse.
Yeah, very much so.
But that's the question. We would. but would that audience? That's the question.
Because there is that predominant idea that the man is the head of the household among the hardcore evangelicals, which that is what this movie is.
And often they are, in the concept of marriage, you can fuck all you want. That's fine. That's natural, which is correct. But they might be in the sense of...
You can get wild upon the marital bed.
The Mormons in particular are really about that. Good for them. That is a good trait to have. But the sense of, the man controls the woman, that I have a problem with.
Yes.
And I do think there might be a little bit of that. That Pierre not getting it is a negative trait of Adriana.
That the audience is supposed to maybe actually side with him a little bit here.
I would never, and you might be right, I would never have thought that either, in a billion years.
Now that you say it.
It seems so obvious that Pierre that's him being terrible, and he is kind of a villain in the movie too.
That's because you're so woke, man.
Certainly by the end, I don't think you're supposed to like either Pierre or Adriana.
No.
Adriana is taking the leap at this point. If you do feel sympathy for her in the scene, it will be the last time that you feel that way.
Yeah, it will. I hate that. From this point, it's just, she becomes a total cartoon.
Insane.
Over breakfast, John and Mary are mushing some oatmeal around, and John says, "We need to talk. I'm sorry for how I've been acting, but there's something else."
I'm not sure that you start out an apology with "we need to talk."
Knock, knock, knock. Oh, someone's at the door. John says, "I'll get it. I'm not that sorry because I'm worried about who this might be."
And look, I understand why he's annoyed and perturbed. Someone's knocking on his door. He is in the middle of this thing. He's afraid it could be involved with that. That's just my reaction anytime anyone knocks on my door.
Me too. I hate it.
I don't care for that.
But it's nothing he's doing wrong coming back to haunt him. It's just his penguin-type dad, Paul, played by Sam Dalton. He is a lovable pastor. He's, how would you guys describe him? Jovial?
Penguin.
That's his main trait.
And I do have to say, because John imagines that Adriana is at the door, it's a whole fake situation.
Yeah, there's a little dream, or I guess daydream sequence.
Where she jumps on him and Mary sees him, and it's all not real.
You can see how much I thought of it.
Exactly. But the thing I like is the jarring difference between seeing that happening and seeing Penguin Dad show up.
Oh, and then what's really weird is when his dad does the same thing Adriana did.
He jumps in John's arms, which first of all breaks John's legs. And then second of all, they do sloppy kiss on the ground as John screams and asks to go to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Paul was concerned because John didn't call him back the other day when he took the business call and hung up on him.
And he did leave his dad a weird message, something like, "Dad, I need your advice about something." And then that was, he got distracted.
John's being very cryptic to everyone.
So his dad's like, "Yeah, so you sounded like a real weirdo the other day, and I was just going to check and see what the hell's going on with you."
I thought I'd waddle my way over here.
Mary loves that Paul's here. She's like, "Oh, Dad.
Can I get you a bucket of fish?"
Yeah. What's your lifespan? When do you have to be back?
To the South Pole.
In the same conversation, Paul also refers to his own wife as Mom, the thing I posited John might later do with Mary. I just don't like any of that. Paul wants the couple to come to church with him right now on no notice. He's got a hot new sermon.
He's been cooking it up for a while.
I've been really thinking. John says, "I don't know, not today. I need to rest, and this is really spur of the moment." And yeah, you can't just get up and go. But Mary wants to go. She says, "That would be fun."
It wouldn't be.
It would not be. And Paul says, "Well, I've never been late in 20 years, so I got to get going. Maybe sometime, though."
I bet he's been late. A couple of times, right? No one minds.
He has to have been. He's like, first of all, he's not that fast.
He can't fly.
Well, and I also have to question if he's that concerned about his punctuality there. Why did he decide, on the way to church, I'll stop at my son's house?
Yeah, exactly.
Impromptu. I don't like it.
I don't either. Doesn't add up.
Don't care for this. I was on board until this moment.
John very awkwardly says to Mary, "I will walk Dad to the car." And then on the way, he says, "Dad, do you believe in soulmates?" Paul's beginning to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Paul quotes the book of Mark and makes it mean. He kind of reworks the words to mean, but not really, that, yeah, God makes you have a soulmate.
Yeah, I didn't really understand how that answered the question, but he did his best.
It's that whole, two become one pile of flesh, and they talk about singular flesh, and I don't care for that. I just don't like that expression.
Yeah, Paul, through all of this, does intuit there may be a problem in John's marriage. Pickles.
Are you and Mary doing okay?
Oh, yeah, she's amazing. We're great. I was just wondering.
Well, just remember, doubt is the devil's specialty.
I know, Pops.
It's metal.
Okay, first and foremost, yeah, it is metal. I think the devil's specialty is probably like scrambled eggs or something. Something
I
real
love
good.
that. I love that.
You love scrambled eggs.
I'd be going to the devil in a
I
second.
mean the hottest sauce, because you know where it was made?
Where?
Hell.
Shit.
That sounds awesome.
And I don't remember what the second thing was. Because I said first off.
I do that all the time now.
Well, that doesn't necessarily promise a second. It hints at
No,
one.
that's true. And maybe the first thing
Okay.
is so incredibly important that it's like, and we don't even need to talk about anything else now.
Yeah. Have you guys ever called a parent or a loved one something other than their position?
I don't care for
No.
that. No, the Pops thing, that is, I don't think anyone in the last 75 fucking years has called their dad Pops.
What about a grandparent? You call them anything weird? Anybody?
Grandpa?
Nope.
Yeah,
they're
I've
just the
only
normal
done
stuff.
mom, dad, grandma, grandpa.
I like Pop. We've brought that up, but I don't actually use it. I just like to use that in a facetious manner.
You never call her any Big Papa?
I have not.
You should try that out.
All I know is the transition from daddy, mommy to mom and dad, which I remember being very proud of. In like third grade, on the first day of school, our teacher was talking to us about take that home to your mommy or your daddy. And I remember being like, I don't call my mom and dad mommy and daddy anymore.
I'm in third fucking grade
Yeah, I
now.
remember being so proud in my heart, in my little 8-year-old heart. Wait, I would have been turning 9, so I probably was 8 in the first day of third grade. But anyway, so I'm sitting there thinking like, these little baby, I almost called them coworkers. These little baby coworkers
Well,
of
that's
mine in
what they're
third
preparing
grade.
you to do.
Yeah, in
Like
essence.
these are still calling their parents mommy and daddy. I don't know when that stopped, but it had to have been around then.
I don't know the answer to this question. I wonder if there was ever a time in which I called my dad daddy.
I don't think there
I
ever
don't know
was.
that would have been permitted. I'm not
Yeah,
joking.
He
I'm
might not have
sure.
let you.
If that happened once, your dad shot that shit right down.
Yeah, like the sisters could. The sister
Sure.
and partial sisters. I'm sure that they could have.
They're not full people. They're only like 80% of a person. That's why they're partial sisters.
What you're describing is the greatest generation compromise. I think that's what that's called. John says to Paul, well, guess what? You know what? Whatever the case, whatever's going on in the marriage, we will be in church next week. We cut to John and Mary asleep on the couch after eating a bunch of pizza, I guess. There's
This
a big
is-
pile of pizza. I wish that I ate pizza.
This is that scene I was talking about when I said there's a few where they look unnaturally sleepy. This is the middle of the day. I mean, I get maybe a little weekend nap is fine. They look out.
Yeah,
they
they're
look
exhausted.
zonked, and
The
it's
other
like 2 in
thing
the afternoon.
is this couch is, okay, they're too far into the relationship to fall asleep together on a couch this small.
I agree with that.
You
And
only do that when you like can't
I
get
guess
away
it
from the
symbolizes
person.
them
when you want to be around
starting
them
to
all
get
the time.
closer again. They're starting to get back to that happy spot for them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's,
well-
that's surely it.
well,
That's what they meant.
Not for long, because John's phone is buzzing loud like a crow again, and it's Adriana. It's time to meet at the downtown cafe. Mary does wake up this time, and she says, what? What's going on? And she hazily says, whatever, I trust you, when he says it's work-related.
All he says at first is, I gotta go do something. Can you imagine telling your wife that? Like, I gotta go do something. Don't say anything else. Okay.
And she accepts it
She trusts him.
when she clearly doesn't trust him right now.
We go to the downtown cafe, and John is telling Adriana how guilty he feels, and she says, why? We shared something that was just an innocent kiss. He says, we are married. Adriana says to John, well, we used to have something special. John says, well, that's in the past. Check, please. And Adriana already has changed entirely. The character now is overbearing and like some sort of very clear temptress. John, for his part, also is really high-roading for having fully given in. We cut to Mary, and things are about to get fun again. It's been a little too dramatic. She's visiting her mom, Margaret, at the pawn shop and showing Margaret the damning bank statements / spreadsheet printouts. Despite the evidence, Mary doubles down on trusting John, but Margaret says, I have a different idea on something we could do. I'd like to hire a private investigator. And Mary says, no, that's ridiculous.
We don't need a really cool character for this movie.
No, this movie only has crappy characters and you, Mom. But it makes sense that Margaret would know or know about the only other cool character in the movie, which is Stark, the private investigator. And we're about to cut to his office where Margaret is hiring him. He's a relaxed Southern gentleman.
And we see the outside of the PI's office, and it's just an old Chinese restaurant.
Yeah.
It's very clearly what it is.
But it's great. It's what this guy would work out of.
Certainly. Like they went out of business and he bought it and it worked out.
I love it.
Now, on the sign, and I air quotes that, I'll get to that in a second, outside, it says Stark and Associates, private investigators, when you just have to know. That's their slogan.
That rules.
And it's CGI'd
Parts of
on
this
there.
movie are so fun.
This is like the Rachel's Place sign on Family Matters. It is not a real sign.
I didn't even notice that. I'm glad you caught that. That's fun. Because I love this guy, Stark. He's wearing a Hawaiian shirt. He's run down. If you had to ask me, I'd guess 4 divorces. He's perfect for this role.
Just a sun-baked, wrinkly old man.
And he's having a good time too, just like Margaret, the actor here, which is Danny Vinson, who plays the guy. He says, I'll aggressively stalk this John guy around the clock. I don't care. I'll find out what he's up to. They eventually get around to a price, but maybe also the start of something else.
All right. Well, around-the-clock surveillance is rather expensive, Mrs. Taylor, as you may or may not. Or can I call you Margaret?
Money won't be a problem, and it's Miss Taylor.
Miss, huh? Miss?
Yes, it's Miss Taylor. And I plan on keeping it that way, so what do you say we just stick to the business at hand, Mr. Stark?
I'll just get right to the facts then.
I'm now shipping these two.
Yeah.
I would rather watch a movie where he seduces her than what we're watching.
The problem with a lot of these movies, these evangelical movies, is that they'll introduce comically outsized cartoonish characters that don't really make sense, but they draw your attention because they're so interesting, and what you've been watching are like bland approximations of what the filmmakers think are normal people.
That scene had a lot in common, DNA-wise, with the scene in Forrest Gump, where Sally Field at the beginning of that movie is meeting with I think it's the principal.
The principal, yeah.
The guy at the school letting in Forrest Gump, and she says, is there anything I can do to change your mind? He says, is there a Mrs. Gump? It's just like what happened in the scene.
I gotta say, I just read and watched The Maltese Falcon, and there's a little similarities there too. Hiring a private investigator. That's all. That's where it ends. This actually didn't win any Academy Awards.
Weird. Didn't take place on Malta either.
No.
Neither did the Maltese Falcon.
No. And neither was that statue from Malta.
Starting to really add up.
All makes sense now.
Stark and Margaret strike a deal eventually after the flirtation. And then we go to Mary's workplace, the doctor's office, a building of science and reason. Mary's just having a conversation, casual conversation with her coworker, Kelly, and Kelly just got back from a vacation to Costa Rica, claims it's the best place on Earth. And I actually, when I was 8 or 9, thought that because of Jurassic Park.
Oh, yeah.
I thought like there might be dinosaurs really there, maybe.
Did either of you guys have a little bit of trouble with the insertion of this character in the movie at this point? I kind of feel like I should have already met, what's her name?
Kelly.
I feel like we should have already met
And
Kelly,
valid question.
at least in passing, if they're going to have her do what she's about
Why
to do right
wasn't she
here.
even in the background of the scene earlier?
Just at some point.
Or I'll give you this, like we're at the hospital earlier and somebody says, hey, Kelly's coming back later. Just
let's introduce her somewhere.
There's a point at the doctor's office, I think it's earlier, where $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase answers the phone and gives it
That's
to
when
Mary.
we get the background that he's buds with John. He's like, yeah, what's up, bro? Or something like that. And he's like, John's on line 1. We got the little man background there.
Yeah, but that could have been Kelly answering the phone.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good call.
So why didn't they do that?
Answering the phone, by the way, in that scene where there's a phone on each side of the room. It's very bizarre.
But perhaps Kelly is supposed to represent an angel who appears out of nowhere to offer a solution.
Yeah, well, we do know by the end of the scene exactly why she's in this movie. It's not exactly subtle.
As Kelly is shoving vacation photos right into the face of Mary, who's anguished that someone else had a good time.
Mary cries and says, let's make this about me now.
Yeah, that's it. Hey, you had a great vacation. I'm glad you're telling me about it, but I don't feel good.
It is really funny that Kelly goes, I had a vacation to Costa Rica. I love my husband. Costa Rica's the best. I might be pregnant.
And then Mary's like, yeah, I don't know. John's cheating on me.
I'm such a jealous, sad person. And this to me, again, the movie does not intend this, but this to me reveals Mary as a horribly abused person who is sad to her core. By this age, by like 30, can you imagine someone telling you good news in their life and you reacting this way?
Yeah, taking it over with your own bad news.
This is a 5-year-old's reaction. Or again, someone who's going through severe trauma.
We're not over-exaggerating either. Kelly says, it's Kelly, right?
Yeah.
Kelly says, I might be pregnant.
By the way, do not cut out us asking what the name is, because to me, that's part of this experience.
It really is.
She wasn't introduced properly.
Yeah.
Well, Bill and Kelly, they go, who knows?
This is a movie where about Kelly, someone could say her. Like in Arrested Development. I mean, she's just such an insert.
And then seconds after saying that, Mary goes, "That's great." And then Sad puts her head down, and Kelly has to go, "What's wrong?"
This is actually making me like cry talking about it in person here because
Kelly
of how jarring this scene was.
She has to comfort Mary. She could have not assumed that her workday would start with like, back from vacation, just looking for an easy, soft landing back into my work week. And then by the end of minute 2, your friend and coworker is bawling. And not even, like, I would understand it if it's like something she needs help with. You want to be there for your friend. But she's bawling because she hates the fun you had. and she hates your unborn child.
Yeah, the thought of that, honestly, from Kelly's perspective, if any of this had ever come out before, you would not be talking to this person anymore.
No.
You would not be sharing this.
You would learn so fast that it's like, oh, well, okay, I can't converse with that person. Let's keep it to business there.
Mary finally spits it out. She thinks John might be seeing someone else. Oh, no. Mary's been bottling all this up, but thankfully, Kelly does have all the answers.
I can never bring up any of this stuff to him, and ever since his promotion, he's been just so uptight, and I feel like I can't talk to him, or just I don't know who to turn to anymore.
Well, you know there's one person you can always go to.
This tin can I'm in.
Who? Jesus.
I love... Wait, what's the wife's name again?
Mary.
I love Mary's reaction. Who?
Who could possibly this be?
Who can I always... What are you talking about,
This
Kelly?
movie is one of the funnier movies of 2013.
I would just, if I were in that situation, be like, oh, so you're not going to help me then.
Oh, so I'm fucked. But no, Mary doesn't take it that way.
Mary's like, oh, yeah.
And they start to share church stories, and then they pray to end the scene.
And you brought up the tin can thing. This movie is not mic'd well. If
No.
there are more than 2 people in a scene, the third one always sounds bad. And then occasionally, if there are 2 people in a scene, one of them sounds bad.
I think on IMDb, under the sound design category, there should just be a dash or an NA.
And ellipses.
I really especially love how, again, this started with Kelly talking about her time on vacation and that she is now pregnant. And it ends with them praying for the marriage of the other person in this conversation.
It is a jarring shift. And if this ever happened to me at work, I would probably go to HR.
Do you think they ever circle back to the vacation, the pregnancy or whatever? Or do you think there's just awkward silence between them for a while?
I think Kelly immediately uses some more PTO.
Yeah, you can't, like we were talking about, you can't ever go back to that well anymore with Mary. That's done.
Oh, but the action does not relent because John's working late.
Huh.
But he's actually at work this time. But Detective Stark is pulling into his parking lot of this. It doesn't look like it's an advertising firm, whatever this place is that John works at. But Stark's there and he's backing across several parking spaces like an asshole.
And he parks between spots.
And as obviously as possible, not hidden whatsoever.
Shouldn't he be inconspicuous? Not so much. And then the other thing is he's probably sitting in his car thinking, I'm in this for the long haul. This is going to be difficult.
Yeah, it's going to take all night and probably several nights.
Yeah.
And we have
weeks.
to assume off screen Stark has been guzzling from a flask out of the glove box.
And smoking a lot.
Yeah, he is smoking. Another unsung hero of the movie, I think, is the sleuth style music that plays.
It's jazzy.
Whenever Stark appears. It's got an Inspector Gadget kind of Pink Panther feel to it.
This is an example, too. I would be all for it if they wanted to make like a Christian-themed movie and they wanted their take on a PI in there.
Yeah.
Try something like that. Don't make it too heavy-handed. I would love that movie. I would be like,
That'd be
thank
pretty
you.
funny.
That I appreciate your effort.
That'd be interesting. I don't know what they would go with that.
It wouldn't be good, but I would be like, that's okay.
Yeah,
I would
you
pat him on the
tried.
back for that. I'd be like, I can tolerate this.
Like just a movie where Kevin Sorbo, well, maybe not him. He's always hateful.
Yeah, but we can't have him in it.
One of the good-natured ones, like a Hoops Hannigan.
Corbin Burnson or something. You know what? He'd be perfect. Grizzled old man.
Yeah.
He could do the
He could
detective
do a
stuff.
PI, yeah.
Like a black and white noir.
Oh, yeah.
Jesus PI.
He'd probably
Okay.
be even willing to drink every now and then, have his character drink.
Well, we need to write this movie.
I mean, he was in Major League, for God's sake.
Roger Dorn. Was he in Major League 2?
I think he was, yeah. At some point, though, everybody else pieces out. Like, Wesley Snipes is like, I am out of here.
Gotta go do Blade. It's not even close, probably. It's like 10 years away.
It's not that far.
It's surprisingly, like, Blade was 96, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
I got to go do Blade 3
I gotta go to jail.
for tax evasion.
Yeah.
It's such a weird thing.
Well, he checked the vampire box, but they found out he was really not one. He's actually a human actor. As good an actor, as compelling as he can be, he couldn't trick the IRS that he was a vampire.
Too bad.
Stark settles in for the long night, as you guys alluded to, but Adriana calls John while he's working, and she says, I'm in trouble. So much trouble, I need you to meet me at the downtown cafe again. And
Where all emergencies take place.
Yeah, and John says, I will be right there.
I'm so stupid.
He pops right out of his office, and I even think the actor that plays Stark plays it well. Like, he kind of fumbles at his car, like, oh shit, already?
He has to duck down.
And then out loud he says, this is like taking candy from a baby, and he is correct. That was just so easy. Stark trails John to the downtown cafe, again, like Spencer said, where every emergency in town happens, where Adriana admits lying to get John to meet her. Duh.
And this
there is no
like
emergency.
The next tier, we already saw her getting insane in the last scene, and now she's just all the way there.
Yep, it's awful. She says, I called you here because we're meant to be. And then she says this.
Look, I met with my psychic today. She told me that we were supposed to be together.
You saw some loony psychic?
You don't understand. Griselda's really in touch with Mother Earth, also known as Gaia.
I'm sorry, Adriana. I have some beliefs that strictly forbid that kind of stuff.
I think it is insane and unbelievable that someone could just kind of pick out some random fantastical sounding facts and adhere to them.
Who do you trust more? You're met with John or Adriana, and you, Spencer, you, Brian, and you need to get information or something with them. Who do you trust more? The one who's talking about Gaia and Mother Earth, or the one who's talking about the Lord and you can't sit with women because of all that
I'm
stuff?
not going to trust either one of these people, but I've alluded to it on the podcast before. I think Adriana could be the sort of person I would be susceptible to trying to have sex with.
Sure.
Because inwardly something would say, oh, your life will get worse if you know, like she's probably really close to insane, just as I am. So this will get really weird and interesting. Whereas someone who's just like, my beliefs forbid, I would be like repelled by that.
Yeah, I think there's a little mystery with Adriana, so I'll go that route.
Yeah.
Spencer?
I mean, between the two beliefs, there is not one that is any more trustworthy than the other. So it's pretty much you toss a coin there. They're both going to be just making stuff up.
No, but all bullshitting aside, this scene is infuriating because what the movie is trying to do is make Adriana into a joke and make John into a saint who realizes how far apart he really has been from her this whole time.
This is his true turning moment. He understands at this moment, because Gaia was brought up, that he's in the right, and even though he's known he's been doing the wrong thing this whole time, it is solidified.
It's so bad that she worships a false idol.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, it actually, to someone like me, and I assume you guys too, makes him look like a judgmental asshole.
Bingo.
Who's contradictory based on the fact that he too has his own unprovable faith.
If only they hadn't taken her in such an obscene direction where she was just spouting nonsense
and
now.
she unveils this series of beliefs all at once because it's an 1.5-hour movie and the pacing's uneven. It's so frustrating to watch. Adriana, she says to John, look, we're soulmates, all Gaias and gods aside. And accurately says, who cares the divine source of what we're using if we wind up in the same place? Fair.
Absolutely.
John rolls his eyes because his beliefs are totally sane.
And correct.
Adriana then says, well, Pierre's going to be out of town, as a hint, still trying to get him to sleep with her.
Really lost all her morals now.
Yeah.
She's like, well, let's just fuck then. I can't have you. We'll at least have sex.
And John just storms out of the downtown cafe in a huff. Adriana chases him, but receives yet another speech about how they're both married. And yeah, he's right, but just repeating that fact over and over again it's so annoying to watch. It really is the Johnny is my best friend.
Yeah, exactly the same thing.
Well, and it's also taking the easy route out, saying we're married. You're not saying I shouldn't do this because it would be a bad thing to do. You're just saying the rules say we're married.
The movie portrays it like John owes Adriana nothing because he's the man and he sinned in his marriage. He does. He roped her in emotionally and he kissed her back. Like, he needs to be able to tell her, look, I don't have those feelings for you. To like actually explain it, I don't have those feelings for you. I realize I do love my wife. I'm going through a thing. I've under a lot of stress lately, and I need to apologize to her and make that right.
But he doesn't do that. He just says, I'm married.
Yeah, movie's bad. Movie's bad and broad. But I would love to see a movie with these morals try to actually just make it make sense. While all this is going on, Stark is snapping away in his car, getting Polaroid after Polaroid. I love that, too.
The camera noise.
He's an old-timey PI. He should be using that. Although, given the movie's portrayal of socialfriendpages.com, that might not have been an intentional choice. It might have been an accident, like, where they didn't realize the new technology.
I wish we could get a whole scene of him doing at length, kind of like how they opened it up in the Italian restaurant and we got to see the behind the scenes of their meal being cooked. I wish we got a scene of him developing the photos in a dark room.
Like he has his own dark room and he's dipping it in the liquid.
I bet he'd be really good at that.
And doing a lot of, oh yeah, that's a good one.
Maybe he got into it, building the backstory for our favorite character here, or one of them. Maybe he got into PI work because he's such a good photographer.
Yeah.
Let's say it's because of the photography, and then he was like, I should make a business.
But perhaps also he gave up on photography as a primary objective because, like, unfortunately, when he did get to college, he had a mean professor who didn't really see what he was going for. So, you know, he put that on the back burner. And yeah, he does PI work, but there's a bit of his story that feels kind of unwritten in his heart, you know.
He
but
just doesn't quite have
the
passion for PI that he has for photography.
No. And when he met Margaret, I think that part of his heart lit up a little bit again, and he thought, this old car's got a little gas left in the tank.
The spark came up.
And look, and everything's coming up Stark. Look at this. After being rejected fully by John, Adriana goes home and cries in Pierre's arms.
What a terrible comforting spot to go to. Oh, at least I've got Pierre to hold me.
And similarly, John just goes up and cuddles up right beside Mary. And the next morning, Adriana tries to call John at work on his cell phone. She still wants him. He stands firm, though. Once he hangs up, John gets frustrated and slaps a couple papers off his desk.
Almost a little preview of the movie we might be watching here in a bit.
I can't fucking wait to talk about that. But anyway, after the paper slapping, who should apparate out of nowhere but Alan? He's back. He's always here in times of need or non-need, and he wants answers. He demands John tell him what's going on, and he demands John give him 5 minutes, just 5 minutes. Again, hearkening back to The Room.
Too much so. You can't have seen The Room and watch that without thinking that. It's not possible.
This eventually convinces poor John, who follows Alan down the hall. Both actors grab their heads, the back of their heads at the same time in a moment of symmetry that could not have been intentional. It looks stupid.
Yeah, it was just a random thing that happened that they didn't fix. Okay, now you guys said earlier, confidently I might add, that John is now above Alan as far as job role at this company. I don't know, because the way Alan acts here, where he says, John, do something for me, take 5. It convinces him, and then it's almost like an order.
I think
I don't know.
I don't think so. I think it's a gracious underling who's showing proper deference.
Well, they say in that beginning when he pays for the meal, like, "Oh, you're sucking up to the new boss already."
Oh, yeah.
So he is under him.
Yeah.
He just is like,
but
I don't
again,
care
above
about your
him
rank.
in the eyes of God.
Right. He's like, I don't care about your rank here. You need my help right now, and I'm going to give it to you.
Much like the rings of a tree, you can count the devoutness of a man by the dents in his face.
And the rings in his head. You see right in the split spot
right in the brain.
Dents and rings, and there's a lot of them in that face.
But for all the dents, it's an oddly smooth brain.
But not like a Krang brain.
No,
it doesn't have teeth.
No, or a big, fleshy, pink monster body.
Well, I don't know. That kind of is Alan.
Yeah, that's true. But enough of these people. Margaret is back at Stark's office, and they're going over all the evidence.
You know what he says to her?
What?
Winter is coming.
We need to go north to the wall. Stark announces, well, I caught him, and Margaret says, well, I'm right. Men suck. They're the worst thing ever.
They'll rip out your heart.
Stark says, well, not all of them. I'm not that bad. Come on, Margaret.
Take a good gander at this, Margaret.
Margaret, I got a fire in my belly again. Margaret, I used to be a photographer.
I was going to say, then Margaret's like, oh, but these photos are amazing.
They're striking.
I would love to hang them up in my pawn shop.
Something in them calls out to me.
It's beautiful.
She starts crying.
This is the heart of a poet on display.
And they hold each other
it's
tightly.
It's just a picture of Adriana and her son-in-law kissing.
It's blurry.
Unfortunately, they do not get together. This is the last we see of them together. Maybe there'll be a
that
sequel
we know.
one day.
Yeah, they could have a little backstory we don't know about.
This could be like Avatar, where it takes us 15 years to do a sequel.
Let's get James Cameron on the case.
Yeah, well, the budget
James
for
Cameron's
this...
online 2025.
Oh, God. I will say I'd love to see it.
Absolutely.
Back at John's office, or what? No, I'm sorry, far away and outside from John's office.
Yeah, a long distance away.
Alan has led John to a picnic table, maybe 4 or 5 miles away. You can kind of see the office way in the background.
They were taking 5 minutes. Well, it took them 5 minutes to
Just
get
to
there.
get there.
Go ahead, turn around and head back.
John starts to open up to Alan. He actually does want help now, but Alan is not helpful in my eyes. He's super smug. He uses finger quotes while saying just a friend to emphasize how right. All this is just Alan saying,
Told you so.
I was right. Told you so.
He's so snotty.
It's awful. It doesn't seem like he's being a good Christian man walking in God's light to
I
man.
mean, his friend is in crisis, and all he can do is kind of like, well, as you should have known better.
Yeah, you got to be friend in Christ is not friend in crisis.
Well, the one thing... Okay. Now, the one thing that was weird is, if you'll notice, when they're walking from the building to the park, there's only one set of footprints.
What do you think happened on the way back?
One of them walked on their hands. So it's handprint.
Alan has another question. That question is, John, are you having an affair? And he asks it straight up. John laughs and says, look, I just met up with Adriana a few times and talked a lot on socialfriendpages.com. But Alan says that means you've already done the deed, and Alan is shaking his head, scoffing.
Yeah, no, when he says basically that you've already committed your adultery here, he's like, oh my God, John, you've already done it. And it's so obnoxious.
It's like on the verge of where he might hit him.
You make me do this.
We know, though, as the audience, that John has already done a kiss, which is sex in these sort of movies. And it leads to a, what have I done? From John. And while I was trying to just do an over-the-top one, that was probably better than whatever he does. Alan says to John, you need to get your heart right with God, boy. It's about like that.
It really is, and it's also the physical stuff doesn't matter. You don't need to figure this out with your wife. You got to do the God stuff.
And he does say
first.
that before you talk to your wife, you need to talk to God. Now, there's a metaphorical reading of this that is not intended by the movie that I agree with, which is you need to get your shit together. You need to think, and you need to take inventory of your life and work on you.
Yeah.
And figure out what you need to say.
That's not what's happening.
That's not what's happening. The
But yes.
literal reading, which is what the movie intends, is you need to pray and get back into the church and get back to your dogma.
Of course.
If it were the first thing, it would be like, okay, this is a good thing this movie has done.
But what I just said is one of the positive benefits prayer can have. If you're, a Christian, is you can go take some time to yourself, pray and think. And I believe one of the benefits is you do calm down, and kind of like with meditation.
Yeah, absolutely.
But these aren't the kinds of filmmakers who want to present those two things as similar. We already know that from prior events, such as the idea of anything other than just strict evangelical Christianity being just absurd. Alan tells John, marriages can't even work without God smashed in there too. None of them. If you don't have this brand of Christianity, your marriage is not real, null and void, didn't even happen.
This is one of the things that really gets you angry.
It does. This is a hallmark of the movie Fireproof. I do not like anything that insists that one way of living or one belief system, if you don't have it, any relationship or anything in your life is invalidated.
It's all fraudulent. Whether you knew it or not, it's not real.
I believe that sort of line of thinking is as clear of evidence of brainwashing intent as anything. Of like, leave your loved ones behind, shall they not take the pact with God with you?
Is it here or in the final scene where he smugly tells, when John's bemoaning the possible loss of his marriage, and Alan says, don't know that you really had a marriage to begin with?
It's later.
Okay, that's the next scene. Okay.
That is so
He's
smug,
working his
too.
way up to that at this point.
He is, exactly. Alan offers what's framed to be a big gotcha question in the conversation when he asks John, are you truly walking in his light? With like a head waggle. How is that a burn? John says, well, I'm basically a pretty good guy, whatever.
Which is a common thing when Christians get together and they're evangelizing, they're practicing their discussions that they have with people who are on the fence about religion, and they get that answer a lot. They get well, I don't really need to go to church because I'm a pretty good guy already. Like I already do things right, and I'm living life righteously in my own way, and I don't need God. Christians have that exact line from non-Christians in their head, is like they expect to hear that. I'm a nice person already. And they're like, aha.
That's a great point, Spencer. The dialogue from movies made like this is often, it feels pulled from questionnaires from Christian websites of like, what might a weird, dirty sinner say? One of the ones like that I like to think about is when movies like this insist that anyone who isn't a Christian or isn't, doesn't have faith is constantly worrying about what God might do. No, we're not. We don't think about God because we don't believe in your particular brand of religion. And this kind of comes across like this, like the inability to separate what you think from what someone else might think. Whereas I feel like it's a lot easier for us to be able to do that. Like, I see why someone, who's an evangelical Christian might believe some of this stuff because I understand their beliefs. I don't think any effort's been made to understand my beliefs.
But that plays into the concept of lack of empathy. Now, they don't all have that, of course.
Of course not.
But
in fact, I would say it's pretty rare that anyone doesn't have empathy.
Or any degree of it.
Yeah.
But the ones who are like John's character here, who can't fathom anything outside of their own realm, they don't have empathy. And they also see struggles or problems as, well, you deserve it.
The movie has accidentally written John as a sociopath because earlier he's sitting around knowing he's going to cheat on his wife. That's why he's talking to himself in the mirror and acting like it's a big deal to meet with a friend. And then here, he just doesn't seem to know how to have a personality or belief system without someone telling him. Despite John's insistence of how he's fine, he's pretty cool, Alan says, whatever, I'm above you, I'm a plane above everyone, and John, you're basically a poser. He walks off and says, you need to think. And John has a flashback of praying and doing Bible verse stuff with his penguin dad as a kid.
Who does have more hair in the flashback.
They did something with that.
I don't know what they did.
Tell you what, the rest is the same, though.
I don't really know what what they did with any of that guy, to be honest.
And this scene, again, inadvertently reminded me of being a child Christian in that Paul's focus here is, hey, we were born and without you doing anything, you were already a dirty, horrible sinner and required forgiveness from a deity you'll never see. And this messes with a curious person's mind, let me tell you, to be told that out of the gate.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't have to go through any of that as a child.
Same.
Since I wasn't part of that until I was much older, I never had to deal with that kind of guilt as a small kid.
I'm not joking when I say it permeates my life today. It's a thing I've talked about in therapy. And I'm not saying that this can't work for someone. I don't know how everybody's minds work, but for someone like me to just put that in there was not the right call.
And then Paul says to his young son, John, in this flashback scene, he says, son, do you have any shiny pebbles I could use to lure an egg mate, maybe?
I also feel like he might just eat a shiny pebble and just shove it ready to feast on it.
Don't like chickens eat rocks? Because then
I think so.
It can help digest things. So,
And then Paul says, a lot of people don't realize that I'm in New Zealand, too. People think it's just the cold places or zoos.
Him telling his son that too, from me, your dad, in New Zealand.
But then young John says to his dad, he says, I'm afraid, Dad. What if I do things wrong? I'm just scared. And the dad says, son, the only thing we have to fear are leopard seals.
Now take this food from my mouth.
Why do we never see the mom? Why does he just reference her, but she's never in this?
She's under the house, I think.
Do you think he buried her?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, he's not just going to leave her out,
I don't know. Sometimes those crazy people do that.
That's true. Back in the present day, John draws on his past experience as a gross sinner and drops to the ground on his knees, arms spread in the air, and delivers one of his signature tearful Leatherhead-type speeches aloud to no one about how Jesus died on the cross and he wants to live to serve Jesus. And then he gasps super loud. Leatherhead didn't do any of that.
That's where the camera goes down his mouth.
Yes.
Salvation cam.
The director makes a big choice here. It's a big swing, and the verdict is, he struck out. And it was in the dirt.
Can you imagine you coming back from your work break and you're like, what's John doing over there?
Oh,
was he yelling at the sky?
Would you, from a distance, I feel like I'd be worried.
Yeah.
Alan, when he turns his head back and sees it, is like, fuck yeah.
Alan's like, hell yeah, my man.
Yeah, like a chest bump.
I helped him do that.
I'm almost as good as God.
You know what I like to see? A man on his knees.
He's got that hair, like I said, spiked straight up with all the gel.
Because he's fucking cool.
The higher the hair, the closer to God.
Back at Mary and John's house, Mary's there. She doesn't know John's doing all this falling to the ground. Margaret bursts in, flinging all of Stark's surveillance photos around and saying, look, your husband's a cheater. But even now, Mary says, Mom, I don't like your tactics, and I think there's more to the story than this.
This must be a client.
But there actually isn't more to the story. Margaret freaks out and says, look, I know what I'm talking about here. I know what happened with your dad. Mary says, John's better than your dad was. John's the best. He wouldn't ever cheat even though he did. And God's working miracles. That's why you have these photos.
Let me call Kelly and tell her about this.
Kelly doesn't answer.
The conversation does end with the mother and daughter calling one another strong and hugging. I don't know why, really.
That was a real kind of a U-turn or something there. It was very strange because she's never really seen eye to eye with her mom. And at the end, she's like, I love you, Mom. Thank you for coming over and trying to end my marriage.
The movie's about to get really intense, though. I have to warn everyone listening and everyone in the room.
Oh, thank you. I was concerned.
Well, I figured you would be, because at John's office, his marketing boss has come in and says, we have a big meeting later with our new huge cosmetics client, Pierre. Uh-oh. Without any context, John then says to his boss, I have someone more important to talk to than this big client. And the boss says, what? And John says, my goddamn wife, that's who. You would never do this at work, right?
No, because your boss would be like, I'm sure that's true for your personal life, but no, she is not more important than this meeting we're doing.
It's just you call her after the meeting.
There are a dozen employees hinging on this deal. Like our livelihoods are going to be impacted by this, John. I need you to do your job for once.
These are just human lives, not God lives. At this very moment, John gets a text from Adriana, and it says, guess what? I told Pierre everything. And John changes course. He has no choice. He says, listen, boss, I got to talk with that client after all. I will be in that meeting. And right now, as a viewer, it's a real lean forward in your seat, rub your hands together moment, because you know something crazy is about to happen.
And it does.
Well, you don't have both your hands because you're, of course, watching this kind of masterpiece with popcorn. So you're eating popcorn with one hand and you're just really rubbing your other hand
your
together.
Buttery hand.
No, the other hand's on the Bible, Spencer.
Yeah, that's true.
You got some
forgot
greasy
about
Bible.
Good popcorn, buttery Bible.
I almost said fry up. I love to fry up some popcorn and read the Bible.
That's what the people in this movie do. There are two scenes of characters strayly eating and reading the Bible. Mary does it and Paul does it.
I don't know that I like to eat and read. You stuff on your fingers.
It's kind of hard. I can do it on a computer, but not in an actual book.
John gives out loud now his boss what I would call a verbal suicide note, like in terms of a career anyway. He says to his boss, look, I love you. Thank you for all you've done for me. It's meant the world to me that you promoted me. Whatever happens in there, man, it's been a good ride.
Well, he even says, you're going to be firing me here soon.
Yeah, he says, after 5 minutes, you'll fire me.
If I was the boss,
I'm not letting him in the room.
Yeah, I'd be like, okay, we'll get out of here. I'll fire you later.
Instead, the boss is just like, John, you crazy coot. Even though John's never indicated that he has an abstract sense of humor or sense of humor.
No, we had that joke earlier, remember, where they talked about former boss Steve Jacobs.
The one that made me want to leave the room when I was watching the movie. Yeah, I remember it.
That scene was supposed to be real breezy, like, I don't know, like 45 seconds, and it felt like it took about 10 minutes.
Oh, it was brutal. John enters the meeting room full of white businessmen, because, oh boy, they are, and he addresses Pierre right away. He says, Pierre, look, we need to talk. It's about what Adriana told me. Pierre is like, what?
Yeah, he has
right
no
now,
idea.
where it's clear he didn't know. Adriana lied to John. But John says, the affair we're having together.
Our little mouth fucking that we did in the car.
Yeah, we whipped lips together. And this is in front of everyone. Just
the boss, Alan, is there.
Alan's in there for some reason.
Couple dozen people.
Alan's looking straight ahead like somebody's murdering a guy beside him. He doesn't want any part of it. Pierre does now finally crack and get mad. Understandably. John gives a speech about violating trust, and then we see Alan kind of give a little nod, very imperceptible.
A little sly smile on the cheek of his lip.
More entertained than anything else, though, is Gerald, who's also in this meeting, and he's kind of like, yeah, Johnny boy getting some.
I love drama.
I love infidelity. Pierre says, I demand you fire John. And the boss is like, yes, I don't have any argument against that. Get out, John.
Pierre says, if we see you again, we will settle this like men.
Hell yeah, with a fencing battle, probably.
On the racquetball court.
John's boss ends this scene by assuring Pierre, don't worry, this will not happen again.
No, this is done. You don't do this deal anymore if you're Pierre, right?
I do like the boss doing that because it's almost like he's saying, what, do you let people seduce wives here?
Yeah.
And the boss is like, I'm taking over. I assure you I've never seduced anyone. It will not happen.
My favorite part here is that both the things you guys said are true. It's so funny because this can't happen again because there's no way you continue with the business partnership. And it also can't happen again because this doesn't happen. This is the most bizarre thing that's ever happened in a business meeting. Oh boy. Online 2013, pretty fun movie to talk about.
That's right.
John comes home to Mary with another we need to talk, and hopefully this time he gets to spit it out. But before he can, Mary flops all those detective photos out and says, look at this shit. I know what you've been up to.
And John gets mad.
Yep.
Are you kidding me?
Unbelievable. He hasn't learned anything from his trip to the 4-mile away picnic table where he fell on his knees, has he? Mary explains, though, I didn't even do this. My mom hired this really cool guy she secretly has a crush on. And he caught you because you're an idiot. John says, look, this is Adriana. We've had some inappropriate meetings recently, which again sounds like a Mike Pence line. Mary seems totally fine about the emotional affair, the fact that the two thought they might still be in love.
Which is absurd because that's the key component
that's the
to
part
this.
that's so awful.
But like all movies and TV shows, the second she finds out about the kiss, oh, she's unhinged. That's real cheating. I don't like that. That bothers me as someone who would be much less bothered by the idea that someone's more physically attracted to a non-me.
No, the problem was...
My draw would be the other thing.
Before he even did anything, he was already in a territory where she wouldn't ever want to forgive him. Before he even called her, the way he felt about her was a problem. That was an issue from the beginning.
A huge problem. It's clear when he was, again, mirror talking.
Honestly, I watched this with the girlfriend Katie, and Katie was like, if there's someone like that, like I'm dating someone and they have a person in their past life that they still have this love for, it's not worth it.
Go do that.
Like, just move on.
Yeah, if you were to learn that someone you were with felt that way about someone else, it'd be like, okay.
If you even thought that a week ago, we can't be together now, you have a lot of work to do, buddy. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, this movie has something that we don't have in real life, which is sort of a get-out-of-jail-free card, and that get-out-of-jail-free card is called our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
Well, and that's it, too, because John the whole time is like, we've solved this. I'm right with God.
And that brings us to this. John says, hey, don't worry. Everything's actually okay now, Mary. I don't know why you're upset, because I figured something out.
You're not involved in this.
Pickles.
How could you do this to me? To us?
Baby, look, I've changed. I've accepted the Lord into my heart.
Oh, you have, huh? Why couldn't you have gone and done that before you went and kissed some other woman?
Valid. Mary says, John, get out. And he does. He heads over to Penguin Pastor Paul's place. And John enters in a frenzy as Paul is doing what? Standing over a counter and reading a Bible in silence in the dark.
He's reading like over a sink or something?
Yeah,
it's weird.
creepy.
And then he's like, hey, where's mom? I haven't seen her in 20 years.
Oh, I hear her sometimes.
I can smell her still. Get the shovel, son.
John unfurls his horrible deeds, his cheating to his dad. And Paul says, yeah, you can stay here.
Also, I actually do have feathers. They're just so dense, they don't work the same as other birds.
Yeah, it feels slick. John adds, while talking to his dad, on top of cheating, guess what else? I haven't been walking a righteous path with the Lord. And his father's like, I get it. But John says, that's changing now. I'm turning it around. I have fallen to my knees. Paul's proud of his son for addressing his mistakes, so they read more Bible verses. And at the end of this part, Paul starts caressing the cover of the Bible. Paul tells his son that getting Mary back is up to Mary, not him, which is better advice than he got from Alan. But Paul adds, you still need to prove to Mary that you're devoted to the Lord anyway.
And that's all she'll really need to.
Yeah, that'll do it, probably. And then father and son pray, and we fade out. A lot of scenes end with prayer. John immediately goes back home to Mary right after this, because this is all up to Mary, and Mary's going to need time, right? But Mary's not there. She's at her mom's. And there's a nicely timed knock at the door right now. John gets excited. He thinks, oh, my wife's back. I really got to talk to her right now after I talked with my dad, who is also a penguin.
It's probably not the worst person
imaginable. It's Alan again, making his 14th cameo in the movie. It's always Alan. John updates Alan what's going on with him and Mary, and Alan says, Mary's just hurt. She's gonna come around, buddy. Alan reframes everything that happened as good news. because it all led John to Christ. When John says, well, what good is all this if I lose Mary? This is when Alan rudely interrupts John and says, look, you didn't even have a marriage to begin with, buddy.
Yeah. It's so smug.
Oh, it's awful. You are just an empty shell and mirage. You didn't have God's arms wrapped around the both of you.
My favorite part about this entire scene is as Alan has arrived, Mary, by the way, has left a note that says, I'm at my mother's. And that's all it says. I'm at my mother's. Alan arrives, sits looking at the note for a while. It's a few minutes. It's a long amount of the runtime. And he looks at John and says, so Mary's at your mom's, huh?
He gleaned that from the hidden details.
We don't know Alan can read. Nothing in the movie suggested it.
So maybe this was really impressive that he knew what it said.
I think it could be.
This is an opportunity for John to turn around and rehire the private eye to look into Mary's business.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So you could have, what's the private eye's name?
Stark.
More fodder for the sequel.
You could have Stark in this scene with Ellen and John with a magnifying glass in the note that's like one sentence, and he's going over it looking for details.
Nodding.
I'm trying to bring it back in.
I see here.
There's room for him.
And that's how he can get back with Margaret, yeah. John claims this is my rock bottom, but Alan reacts to it like any friend by maniacally laughing and saying, it's only up from here. And Alan, he seems so joyful again because of this commitment to Christ. Not since he thought Mary was at the restaurant with John has Alan been this excited.
He sure revels in awfulness. He's so delighted that John is at his bottom. His rock bottom is worse.
What a weird thought, too, that might actually be the way evangelizing Christians might be toward a non-Christian is, I hope they go through something terrible, so maybe they turn to God.
The movie is unwittingly revealing its psyche. I said this about that. There was a Michael Jordan documentary series on Netflix that I loved, and a lot of people's complaint about it was, well, Michael Jordan has editorial, control over the whole project, so you're not going to see anything too revealing. But in and of itself, knowing some of the things he let through and thought were totally normal guy things to say reveals something in itself. He thinks this sort of weird psycho thing where you plot against people is normal human behavior. This movie kind of does this. It tries to moralize, and because you know what side it's taking, it tells you that it actually is pretty petty about all of its stances.
Online 2013.
Alan won't even really let John vent in this conversation, which is another thing I don't like. After something like this, you need to talk a lot and think a lot. And Alan just says, nope, God, trying to redirect it back to scripture. Eventually, John says, well, all I know, my next step is to get my wife back. And Alan says, yeah, in a way that's meant to be a pull the shades down, cool badass. It's awful. I hate it.
And it's also kind of and do that right now. Go over right now. Give her no space at all, no time to think over everything you did. Just go tell her that she has to take you back, and she will.
We not let the women actually think about how horrible we are.
And Alan seems like the kind of person who would be let's go. I'm going to go with you.
I'm going to go too.
I'll drive.
I'll talk to you.
We're all married now.
No, I like the idea of Alan being go do it, and I'll stay here and root for you.
I'll be at home. And they come back home, and he's vacuuming their carpet.
Or the place is trashed, and he's just upended everything.
He was just a fraud the whole time, and he just wanted to rob him.
No, I like the idea that he's still this guy, but his way of being wild is he is a little dirty, and he's left empty soda cans everywhere.
What a bastard.
That's as wild as he can get. A really syrupy song plays. I've got a sample lyric here. It's, I've seen dreams that move the mountains.
That's what faith can do.
Yeah. John knocks on Margaret's door. Margaret, again, is Mary's mom. Having given Mary, 3-4 hours to process her husband's infidelity, we then fade out. That is it. Or is it? Because the whole end credits sequence is just our next year. A happy ending slideshow of traditional family middle-class moments in any Christian white household as Mary and John enter their new throuple with Christ.
They're really careful to make sure the first couple pictures show that rocky transition phase with them.
Counseling with a pastor, not a dirty man of science.
Right. And then a Bible. And then they're together with a Bible.
And they're together.
You get 2 or 3 like that, and then they're fine after that.
And I remember knowing with Van, when we watched this the very first time years ago, that this would end with a photo of a pregnant Mary, and it does.
It absolutely does.
If you don't have a kid, then you're probably not properly blessed by God. You need
to
to
make more Christians, buddy.
You got to consummate and have the evidence that you consummated.
So happy ending ever, everything turned out fine. That is Online 2013, a very dumb movie, and our 4th entry into the Motion Picture Men catalog.
I have to say, I'm sure I complained about this when we watched it together as our preview for it, if you want to call it that. I just find it the most chicken shit approach ever to be like, let's talk about all the conflict they had to work through in a credits format. Put it in there and say it worked out and you'll just know.
Just glaze over it.
Yeah, glaze over the fucking hard part, you know? Like
I thought you were going to say the heart of the film. There was so much of that would have taken nuanced effort from everyone, the actors, the actual characters in the movie, the people who wrote it. And they're like, we don't need to do that.
Anytime this movie brushes up against having to like really get into a topic, it's like, we don't know how to do that. And they just shy away from it. And the credit sequence is the ultimate example.
Maybe that's to their credit. They know their limitations, so they're saying, fuck it, let's just do it this way.
But it could be even funnier. I have a thought. Why is this movie called Online? That's such a tacked on element.
I think
feels like it's trying to capitalize on the idea of social media.
Bingo. Because they thought kids would get
that.
into it.
Yeah.
They would see it and they'd be like, this is a tech movie.
This was big craze amongst the high school kids.
There's also that whole dilemma, especially I think 10, 20 years ago, that religious people were having, like fighting whether or not the internet is
good or bad.
Yeah, whether it's too inherently evil to be allowed.
We saw that in Touched by an Angel.
Yeah, that element always comes to play where they're like, this new world-changing technology kind of drives, it's almost like that temptation that we're supposed to flee from, maybe. There's an element of that in this too, where it's like, let's not do that social media or internet stuff because you might sin. It's easier to sin with the internet in your life. I don't know, there was a degree of that was perhaps present as well in this.
Instead, stand over your sink and read your Bible.
It really did feel like just your traditional one of these with that tacked on and just everything done a little worse, a little sloppier, and a little less artless. And as a result, it does stand as one of my favorite bad, fun to make fun of movies we've seen in this genre.
It is interesting because, I don't know, I think after the first time I watched it, I don't know that I would say, like, this thing is distinct in any capacity. It felt like all the others, but with more time and more viewings, it really is. And there's something about this that's just different.
Why I really wanted to come back to it, is for whatever the reason, it stuck in my craw as being a little too off.
Well, it's very uncanny valley in every capacity.
I'm very glad we revisited it.
As I alluded to when we kind of got started on this, is like all their attempts to make us believe that, no, this is a real place with real people. I don't believe any of it. I don't buy it. That's not real. Those aren't even, like, none of those people are actually real in that.
It's like purgatory or something.
Fitting. Mm-hmm. Well, you can't find us, Boob2 Boys / Motion Picture Men, the podcast, on socialfriendpages.com because it doesn't exist.
Not yet, until we bring it back.
We'll buy it.
You can find us on YouTube, though, at Bootu Inc. You can also find us at patreon.com / Bootu Inc., where we have some bonus content. You know what else? Well, you can find us on Blue Sky now. I'm at Loud Guitar Brian. Spencer's at Golden Hat. Mick Van is at Bootu Inc. You can also leave us a review. Please do that on Apple Podcasts or wherever. Give us 5 stars and we'll get a tattoo of this man with the forehead crease on our butts.
No, on our forehead crease.
Oh, yeah. Well, we don't all have those, do we? So you can really find us anywhere you want. But next week we have something else to do, which is another movie. I'm not picking it this time, and it has nothing to do with church. Or does it? I don't know. I do know, actually. Spencer, what is it?
I don't know how to describe what I picked. I really don't. So, long time ago, about 10 years ago, we watched a whole bunch of movies that became iconic in one evening, me, Van, and Brian did. And one of them was about college students who are also in a rock band, who are also all kung fu experts.
Yeah.
And there's some kind of turf war. I'm doing my best to summarize the plot.
Does anybody have a mullet?
There's a lot of them. A lot of them. There's a turf war. They're college student rock band, and everyone's fighting, and everyone knows kung fu, and they're all orphans. And that's the best I can do.
They all live together.
It's the best I can do.
This does cover it, yeah.
That's pretty much what it is.
It's a real movie. He's not making it up.
I could never make up something so disjointed even if I tried. This movie is Miami Connection. What year was this movie?
1987.
I think that's right.
From 1987. I haven't done any of the background research yet. That will be my cross to bear, which is an appropriate thing to say.
I don't know if I told you, but I found a couple of like short documentaries about it.
Oh yeah, and I need to watch those. I will put in my time in my research, and we will be experts when we come back on this with the show, the movie, I should say. But at this point, I'm just kind of ballparking my estimation of this and how it's going to be, and it's going to be hard because there's not a lot of substance in this film. It's a lot of beating people up and awesome songs.
That's the substance, is the songs, and songs are good.
Talking about the songs quite a bit.
There's also, I think, memorable fight scenes.
Yeah, I don't know how we're going to talk about them, but
they're a little more. I'll tell you what we will talk about is that they end a little differently than you might think for a movie like this.
And Van, you know a little bit about the guy who made it, right?
Yeah, YK Kim is a Korean-American guy who started like a bunch of Taekwondo, I guess, like stores, I guess you could call it. He franchised it, so they opened a bunch of them around the country, made a lot of money off of it, so he financed this movie, and it took way too much money. Basically, he
way too much Taekwondo.
Yeah, bingo, and it bankrupted him, and then I guess they never really released the movie, or they did a light release, and then 15 years later, somebody found it on a hard drive or something or other, and by now, the bad movie kind of thing had come around. They loved it, started releasing it in special instances or whatever, and it has become a cult hit.
It is very much canonized now, and it deserves it. It's
absolutely.
Very fun to watch, and I have a feeling it's going to lead to some really interesting conversations about the 80s.
It had better because like the movie itself, I could probably give us the quick rundown of the scenes that happen in that in about 10 minutes.
Right.
So we're going to do a lot of talking. That's Miami Connection. We will do our best.
We're going to find out who is for and who is against the ninja. But before we do that, and before we leave today, Van, let us exit with yet another verse you've picked at random from the Mormon Bible.
Jacob 5:29-39, number 34. I think that's a paragraph.
They have too many numbers in those.
And there's colons and I don't know. And the servant said unto his master, Behold, because thou didst graft in the branches of the wild olive tree, they have nourished the roots, that they are alive and they have not perished. Wherefore thou beholdest that they are yet good. And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard said unto his servant, The tree profiteth me nothing, and the roots thereof profit me nothing, so long as it shall bring forth evil fruit.
Olives are evil fruit?
Yes.
We also have a website. It's bootuinc.com.
I felt so lost in my marital bed. Thoughts of closed lip kisses in my head. An old flame back in town again. My heart and manhood full of sin. Had to get this off my chest to the old guy at work with a forehead crest. He said, listen, son, just give me 5. It's worth it, I'm always right. A few minutes later, I'm on my knees, changing my life. A few minutes later, I found the words for my wife. I love you, you love me. We hold hands and yet it still feels empty. If we wanna stay together, gotta hook up with our number 3. I love you, you love me. We need to make room for Jesus to slip between us and make believers out of our filthy flesh and bone. Talk to my pops to get so married. the bedroom we go, call him down from the sky. We are awestruck at first, I mean look at this guy. He has granite for abs, he has holes in his hands.